the Fiber Arts crew. I came to Warren Wilson in the late 90s as a student. I was really interested in sustainable agriculture, good morning, and quickly found that understanding chemistry was not what my brain wanted to do, and I was really more tended towards the kind of creative side and history and anthropology and just the making. So I ended up elsewhere and learned how to weave, and then found myself back here at Warren Wilson helping a group of students revive the Fiber Arts crew. So Warren Wilson had a deep history of teaching weaving and having a weaving work program from the 1920s through the 1960s. And I'm not going to go into a deep part about that history, but that kind of renewed interest, that revival of teaching traditional fiber skills and kind of exploring what that looked like to Warren Wilson in our kind of contemporary world is why really all three of our craft crews started, but that's kind of like the origin of how Fiber Arts got started in the fall of 2009. So we're in our 12th, 13th year of being a crew. And we really focus on three things: education, research, and exploration. And so really a lot of what we do is just educating on mainly weaving, but we also dive into natural dyeing and fiber qualities and processing and sewing in the sustainable textile industry. So we kind of have these like four pathways under which our education and our learning exists. And within all of that, we leave plenty and ample time to explore. So when students have a particular class that they're in or a particular interest of study, they have opportunities to welcome, really dive into a subject, spend time doing their INSERS work. We've had a couple students who have done their INSERS work diving into research on a particular natural dye, or currently Rangi is a student, a first semester senior who will be presenting next Monday, kind of looking at some of the spent hemp from the hemp growing operation and seeing if it has any dye potential on fiber. There's a chemical in weld, which weld is one of the strongest yellow natural dyes, and it's also contained in hemp leaves, and so she's kind of been doing some studies on its viability as a natural dye. Let's see. Yeah, so just playing with new materials, finding ways that we're teaching skills, making things for campus. We do it all, right? So how do we use our land resources? So we use the wool that the farm raises. We learned how to spin yarn for incorporating into our weaving projects, and yarn for sale for folks to crochet, knit up their own items. We learn about felting and like the history of felting and what all kinds of things you can do. There's some examples upstairs. So we dive into utilizing our wool for laptop cases, bags, dryer balls, Christmas ornaments, all kinds of fun stuff. So our natural dyes, or natural dye and fiber garden. It's not just for natural dyes. So we grow a variety of natural dyes, and inside you guys will see some examples of the actual dry dyes and some of the yarns and cloth that have been dyed with it. And also we have grown a variety of different fibers that can be used for paper making, for making yarns. We grow flax, which makes linen. So we just learned the whole, fiber ground to cloth process. How are these fibers, what's the difference between cotton and flax, and how would you use it in a fiber, in a cloth? and then learning the whole stages of processing it, because they all use different equipment, they all have their own unique qualities. So really just diving into understanding the qualities of the fiber, what their limitations are. On the porch here, I have a loom set up with, we're making a local woman's burial shroud. It was kind of this big project that we had planned for 2020 before COVID hit, and it kind of became like a very symbolic project that we kind of continued into fall in kind of response to why we're doing everything that we're doing with COVID, like keeping everybody safe so that we don't die and those vulnerable folks around us and that we care about don't die. So it's kind of been this very symbolic project that we've worked on. And that's completely, well, the warp threads are commercially bought flax linen, but everything that is used to weave the cloth was grown here on campus and hand processed. So that loom is set up on the porch, and I invite anybody that wants to learn and just sit on the loom today and weave on that a little bit. I can show you how to do that. We've also grown some cotton in the past, and just kind of, cotton doesn't typically grow in this region, but it kind of grows like an hour south and an hour east of here. But we've done some studies on the viability of growing cotton in our climate and our growing period, our growing season here, and just kind of talking about the, deep-seated history around, cotton growing and the history and colonialism and capitalism. So we kind of touched on the social justice issues of the textile industry here as well. Kind of interested in looking at this idea of, humans as invasive species, and using the invasives that are here on campus, such as bittersweet vine for baskets, or the kudzu for cloth and baskets. We kind of just dive into exploration and how and what of that. And there's some examples upstairs. All right. So this topic was fibers, fashion, and conservation, right? So while a lot of what we do is just kind of the educational side of like traditional crafts, it's really important to note how those skills play into a larger conversation about the textile industry and kind of where we are today in 2021 in our textile industry, right? So we have a whole range of problems that you guys, probably are aware of, right? Just the pollution into the air and the water of dyes. Traditionally, all cloth prior to the 1880s would have been dyed with natural dyes, and they would have been mordanted with a natural solution, and traditional cultures would have just washed their cloth in the river, and they would have taken their affluent, their wastewater, and irrigated their crops. And that was just this natural cycle that did not cause any damage to the people and to the earth. And now that we have synthetic dyes that have pretty much taken over our clothing industry, the wastewater is kind of treated in the same way, and it's put into the earth, it's put back into the waterways. And synthetic dyes are all basically petroleum based, and they also require a really, really high salt content to actually fix on the cloth. So rather than this wastewater just kind of being something that can be composted back into the ground, it is highly, highly saline liquid, right? So it's ruining crops, that this kind of irrigation. The synthetic materials that are used in these dyes are causing major, major health problems to the industry workers that are mostly in other countries, right? Because NAFTA was signed in the mid-1900s and took all of our textile industries overseas because of deregulation, cheaper labor, and now we have this textile industry that we have, I think it's like 23 or 27 seasons, right, of the clothing industry. It's like every 2 weeks we have a new like line of clothing coming out, right? Like we have 4 seasons, right? Why do we need 27 like new waves of clothes coming out? So we just have this massive problem of cheap clothes being produced, synthetic clothes being produced. And I don't want to say that it's all wrong and it's all bad, but as consumers, we just have we have a duty to understand to understand this problem that our earth is seeing, this kind of waste of clothing, and making conscious decisions about where you're sourcing your clothes, supporting local, supporting companies that are doing the right thing. I'm not going to go deep into this conversation because it's really deep. And this idea of mending, right? So this is something that our crew has really taken on here. It's been harder in COVID times just because we can't gather as much, but this idea of just teaching people how to mend your clothes, whether it's learning how to use a sewing machine or hand repairing, and just kind of giving new wear. And this it's very symbolic to this idea of not only mending your clothes, but kind of mending our culture, right? And so I think that that's also really important. It's not only the sourcing, but it's also kind of where we're at with what you have. And we're just in a place where we need to create new standards. In European countries, they have far outpaced what we're doing here in the US by really holding companies accountable. But I'm seeing steps here, and there's this huge movement of kind of asking, like, where are your clothes made? Where are your fibers coming from? And so that's kind of the premise of a lot of it's kind of back full circle, right? Back to the education of what we try to start here, that fibers are coming from plants and animals. I'm not going to go into my thoughts on plastics and synthetic materials. I think they do have a purpose, and I'm not going to call them all bad. I like my jacket right now that's keeping me really warm. So I'm not, I don't judge, right? There's a time and a place for everything, but really learning that fibers also just have that origin, plants, animals, what their uses are. Getting to know your farmer, supporting local businesses, and then figuring out a way that everybody can kind of afford that so we can kind of keep this cycle going. I think that's something that I'm really passionate about in my work outside of Warren Wilson as well. All right, and then conservation of what, right? So aside from kind of all of these deep-seated issues of, how fibers and dyes in the textile industry and waste and people and human labor need attention and tending and care, so do just the preservation of the skills and the knowledge base of this. There were traditionally a lot of dye recipes were, not written down. They were passed from, through apprenticeship work, and a lot of these traditional recipes and techniques and skills across the globe are getting lost, right? So it's just this need to keep education at the foundation of kind of really anything that you do, right? And that's why you guys are all here at Warren Wilson, I'm sure, to kind of keep that education of what you're passionate about. And that's what I'm doing here, and keeping it going with the Warren Wilson students and fiber, because that's what I'm passionate about. So on that, we've got a large group. I don't know how you guys want to break up. We have 2 floors to explore, and I'm just going to invite you guys to see our looms in action. I have Isabella inside for a little bit longer, and she's threading one of her looms, so you can kind of see how that process works. I've got some examples out on the looms of some cloth that we've woven. In the kitchen area, I have the dyes out on a table, and they're labeled. So it's just kind of a wander and kind of tour and see things. And then upstairs, I have some fibers and some samples laid out, and you can kind of see just where the magic happens inside of here and wonder what's going on in here. So I'm going to push down on A. I'm going to send the shuttle through. I'm leaving this little triangle. I'm beating it down, and then I'm switching my foot to B. So this project I was mentioning, so I'm just going back and forth, A, B, A, B. If anybody wants to try it out, you're not gonna mess it up, I promise. So this woman's a deaf midwife, and she envisioned wanting to, she wanted her burial shroud that she ended up burying herself or someone else buried her in would be completely made from plants that were grown and harvested and worked in this area. And so we had kind of big plans of doing like community gathering and education around making the shroud, and it kind of ended up turning into a project that the craft material studies class started last semester. Push it down. So what that does is that raises up a set of harnesses where the other ones stay down, and then you just send that shuttle through. This is the beater, so you're just gonna bring it towards you. Yep, and then switch your foot to the other one. Easy enough. And so this is the most simple cloth. You'll see other cloth inside that was done a lot more with a lot more intricacy and thought and threading. You'll see Isabella threading the loom, so it's threading all of the different petals and in a different pattern and order is what makes more complicated patterning, but this is just simple plain woven cloth. So before like the takeoff of industrial revolution and like powered looms, all cloth would have either have been like hand knotted, like hand knit, or hand loomed. You can just stick it in here. We'll throw it away. Yeah.
I guess I gotta get on fiber art for a week or something built before I graduate.
Yes. We have a Warren Wilson has a registered tartan that has a story about like the colors and the history.
Which way did it go last? Does it matter? It's ready for A. It's ready for A, so I push down A, and it goes this way.
And we've done some weaving with the tartan in the past. Yep, it's just going in that shed in front of, nope. Yeah, there you go. So those threads kind of open up like alligator mouth, and then the shuttle is through it. And part of it's just kind of learning like how hard you have to throw the shuttle. All right, here we are inside, looking at a few different looms.
But it gets really small. It gets down to like almost like thread, like sewing thread size. That's amazing. Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. One of the brands you can get, it's a European brand. They don't officially sell in the U.S. anymore, but you can get it through vendors. It's a DMC. So someone painted on.
Here's some of the natural dyes.
And then wove over it. Sorry. And then you take the weft, which is like the word really set up. Oh, it's that, like that. And you push that through, and that creates this element of it. So it's kind of, it's like this.
Yeah. How much did these typically cost?
The looms themselves, they're really expensive.
I actually
know.
So now we're upstairs looking at the felting Here are some felted birds. There's a bird enthusiast named Daniel on this crew. Here's flax being turned to linen. Cotton. Kudzu, the invasive species. What's there?
I know you can make baskets out of English ivy. I wanted to ask her about that.
Here are the baskets made of all kinds of things. Also some natural dye collections.